Let's take a quick look at some business news now. And while US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says the central bank will continue efforts to aid the economy, like zero interest rates, but he said that recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic in the US looks to be strengthening. Fears that could prompt the Fed to raise rates did hurt stocks on Wall Street in recent weeks, but here's a look at how Monday closed there. We saw the Nasdaq Composite gaining 1.2%, the S&P 500 rose 0.7%, breaking a two-day losing streak, while the Dow Jones went up just 0.3%. Meanwhile, here's a look at the current state of play on the main Asian indexes. As you can see, it's very much a different picture there. It's red across the board. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong down over 1.5 percentage points. The Shanghai Composite also in the red, over 1%. The Kospi and Seoul down 0.5 percentage point. And the Nikkei in Tokyo down 0.25%. France's economy minister has floated the idea of early sales this year, the goal to help businesses sell off stock. As you'll see in the next report, many shop owners doubt, however, that this will help them get back on their feet after a catastrophic year due to COVID-19. Yenna Lee reports.
In the storage room of this shoe shop, boxes and boxes of unsold items. The owner's stock is piling up with barely any customers in sight.
There's loads more deliveries I received Thursday and Friday that I haven't even had the time to organize yet.
This businessman's store has been closed since France's latest lockdown. He's still allowed to sell products through a click and collect system, but it's barely enough for him to stay afloat.
It really worries me because I have to pay for all of these goods. I have bills to pay on the 31st of March, and I have no idea how I'm going to be able to manage.
For him and other business owners, the future is more uncertain than ever. In Paris, this woman says the only way her shop can survive is if it's allowed to reopen.
I'm scared for my shop and all the businesses that have been caught up in this nonsense. I'm afraid of the consequences on my personal life. I don't know what to say to my children. We have families. We're desperate.
To help small businesses affected by COVID lockdowns, France's economy minister says he's looking into two measures: early sales and financial aid. Suggestions that don't go nearly far enough for this retailer.
The ready-to-wear industry is at a standstill. We're only buying stock and selling it on sale 2 months later. It's been this way for a year.
Currently, some 90,000 businesses in 16 French departments are shut due to COVID restrictions.
Okay, a quick look now at how the papers are covering one of today's top stories, with the EU and the United States imposing sanctions on China over Beijing's treatment of Muslim minorities, while the Washington Post argues that the Biden administration is doing exactly what it should be. The paper's editorial board argues that this coordinated reset is exactly what is needed to show that democracy can still prevail. However, the French paper L'Opinion wonders whether the Biden administration may be going too fast. Their illustrator CAC points out Biden may be taking too many steps at a time as Washington tackles both resetting relations with China and Russia. The paper says Washington has a bloody no strategy, or they hit hard first and then open up to talks. When it comes to the sanctions coming from Europe, one of the potential victims is the EU-China trade deal, according to Politico. The site says that relations have quickly nosedived since the showdown over sanctions, which means coming to an agreement on trade will be increasingly difficult. For the Beijing-backed Global Times, the EU sanctions may be symbolic in nature, but they're also vicious. The Chinese paper says the sanctions demonstrate the EU's moral arrogance and its intent to interfere in internal affairs, a stance the paper says that merited counter-sanctions. Well, our press reviewer Solange Mijan will be on set in exactly an hour's time for more on that and a selection of other stories in today's papers. Meanwhile, today marks the 6th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Principles by Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia. It was a text set to put an end to water disputes between the three nations. But as Adana Mansour shows us, those tensions certainly continue.
The Nile, one of the longest rivers in the world. Its history is tied to that of Egypt, even ancient Egypt. Before leaving the region in 1959, the British decided on how the Nile was to be divided between regional neighbors. A year later, Egypt launched its Aswan Dam project. this was not without controversy, as the Nile also crosses Ethiopia. In May 2010, several countries agreed to share the river. In theory, it allowed them to develop irrigation projects or dams without asking Egypt. In 2011, Ethiopia revealed its own large dam project. Its volume was expected to reach 74 billion cubic meters. The first stone of the project was laid in April of that same year. It stirred up tensions. Ethiopia would like to exploit it as soon as possible. On the other hand, Egypt fears a huge decline in its water supply. In 2015, both countries signed a declaration of principles. But in 2019, tensions rose again between the two neighbors. The United States tried to mediate. Ethiopia and Egypt decided to continue the talks. The stakes are high. Avoid an armed conflict, the consequences of which could be disastrous.
Okay, time for a quick break now, but we're back with more updates and stories after this, so do stay with us.